AGI. We can't seem to stop talking about it. But what does it really mean? I did some research to find out what the actual experts seem to think about AGI, what their definition is, and whether or not we're really there yet. I'll give you a clue on that last one. Nobody really knows. But some of what the experts say is pretty interesting. Let's find out how the experts answer the question of what is AGI exactly, or are we there? Let's dive in. About a week ago on his blog, Sam Altman posted, "As we get closer to AGI, it feels like an important time to look at the progress of our company. There's still much to understand, still so much we don't know, and it's still so early, but we know a lot more than we did when we started." If you move in a bit, he talks a bit more about AGI. He says, "We are now confident we know how to build AGI as we have understood it traditionally. We believe that in 2025, we may see the first AI agents join the workforce and materially change the output of companies. We are beginning to turn our aim beyond that to superintelligence in the true sense of the word." Okay, kind of fantastic words here. He's saying formally he believes the way that they understand it, traditionally understood AGI, they know how to build. Now, that traditionally understood is the thing we're going to dig into here. What do we even mean by AGI? He's moving on to ASI. That's a whole nother thing. We'll get to that some other time. Right now, let's try to understand why we keep seeing it pop up. Let's dive in just a little bit more on what Sam has to say about it, as well as many of the other leaders in this space. One reason it's important is Microsoft and OpenAI have a pretty particular deal where Microsoft gets a lot of access to the products that OpenAI produce because of all of their early investments. And that kind of turns off once OpenAI achieves AGI. So if we scroll down, we'll see that the two companies signed an agreement in 2023 that defined AGI as a system that can generate $100 billion in profits. Okay, so that's kind of a meaningful fiscal definition or active definition of AGI, something to say if we build a system sophisticated enough, theoretically sophisticated enough to create $100 billion in product, then we've achieved AGI and only then. And I believe they've been working on updating this information and trying to harden that to say once they achieve $100 billion from the AGI itself or from the model itself, only at that time will this part of the deal expire. But this still leaves us with the initial question, what is this AGI? Artificial General Intelligence. What's that general doing in the middle there? We know what AI is, or kind of. What's this AGI concept? So the generalization, I think, is trying to say once you learn something, it can be used elsewhere. Very commonly, you'll hear it described as you know multiple domains, not just a single domain. There's a whole bunch of variations on what people mean by AGI. Let's look into where the term came from, how it was used first and defined, and then how others today define it and find it useful or not. In 1997, Mark Gebrude wrote a paper for Nanotechnology and International Security. I believe it was a conference that was given, and this was his findings about artificial intelligence, the future of warfare and weaponry, these kinds of things. And he was kind of saying what we think today is advanced warfare is not nearly what advanced warfare will be when you start taking into consideration advanced general intelligence. And that's within this paper. And as far as I can tell, this is kind of the first inference of AGI in the wild. As we move into his paper, you can see artificial intelligence as a factor, as a section. He says, by advanced artificial general intelligence, I mean AI systems that rival or surpass the human brain in complexity and speed, that can acquire, manipulate, and reason with general knowledge, and that are usable in essentially any phase of industrial or military operations where human intelligence would otherwise be needed. Some systems may be modeled on the human brain, but they do not necessarily have to be, and they do not have to be conscious or possess any other competence that is not strictly relevant to their application. What matters is that such systems can be used to replicate human brains in tasks ranging from organizing and running a mine or a factory to piloting an airplane analyzing intelligence data, or planning a battle. Okay, so this is really forward thinking. 1997, this is early in this understanding. We had moved into neural nets and things like that, but nothing of any substance yet. So to be thinking this far ahead is really impressive. And really to even leave the door open to say, it doesn't have to work like a brain. It doesn't have to have consciousness to be able to stay short of those kinds of things, but still to say an AI system or a computing system that would be used in a complex situation, much like today we use a human. I think that that's actually a very meaningful definition. It's maybe a little bit too focused. It does kind of state that it needs to have the complexity or rival the complexity of a human brain, which kind of starts to indicate how it's doing its work, the method by which it's doing this. And I'm not sure that that's terribly useful when we talk about AGI as a concept, the functionality of it. I'm not sure it needs to be more complicated than the human brain to be generalized intelligent. So this really felt like a really interesting start, a very good early definition.
Do you think there's a chance that XAI, you are the one that builds AGI?
It's possible. What do you define as AGI?
I think humans will never acknowledge that AGI has been built.
Just keep moving the goalposts.
Yeah. So I think there's already superhuman capabilities that are available in AI systems. I think what AGI is when it's smarter than the collective intelligence of the entire human species.
Well, I think that normally people would call that sort of ASI, artificial superintelligence. But there are these thresholds where you say at some point the AI is smarter than any single human, and then you've got 8 billion humans. So and actually each human is machine augmented by the computers. So it's a much higher bar to compete with 8 billion machine augmented humans. That's a whole bunch of orders of magnitude more. So, but at a certain point, the AI will be smarter than all humans combined.
Okay, so I kind of like that clip. I think that Elon was right here to indicate that what Lex was talking about was closer to something that today we call ASI, kind of this concept of the super intelligence that we can't possibly reach. But I do like Elon's willingness to kind of admit, look, we don't really have a definition for AGI. If you're willing to define it, I'll have a conversation in that space. The flip side to that is Jensen Huang, who has been quoted as saying he's bored with the question of AGI, particularly because he feels like he's been misquoted so many times. And I think that that's probably very appropriate. As you can say in this article, he's even mentioning he doesn't find it particularly useful to talk about AGI necessarily. We still haven't gotten much closer to the actual definition of what AGI is or what we're chasing. Let's dive in just a little bit more. In a Bloomberg article written January 5th, Sam Altman is quoted as saying, "I think AGI will probably get developed during this president's term." And of course, with that, he's talking about Donald Trump, who was just elected. I think that that's pretty interesting. That takes us to 2029 by some definition. And early in the article, you can see that the interviewer says, as a company, you've sort of stopped publicly speaking about AGI. You started talking about AI in levels, and yet individually you talk about AGI. And Sam answers, I think AGI has become a very sloppy term. And the hope of the levels is to have some more specific grounding on where we are and kind of like how progress is going, rather than is it AGI or is it not AGI? And I think that that's an incredibly important point. We'll come back to that thought as well. What's the threshold where you're going to say, okay, we've achieved AGI, the interviewer asks. The very rough way I try to think about it, Sam answers, is when an AI system can do what very skilled humans in an important job can do. I'd call that AGI. And later he goes on to say, that's AGI-ish, which I think is actually a reasonable add-on. It feels like him pulling back from the answer, but it is still that definition of we don't have a clear enough definition of AGI to say when we've reached it or if that's even meaningful to denote. Let's take a look at the levels that they're talking about. As we can see here, there's 5 levels that OpenAI has defined, and Google DeepMind has proposed very similar frameworks as well to talk about levels of moving through AGI or through AI as we move toward superintelligence largely. As you can see, the first one is chatbots. We've had that one for a couple years now. Level 2 is reasoners. We obviously have moved into the age of reasoning with O1 preview last year and now O3. Agents, level 3, I think that's exactly where we are. And this year is going to be absolutely filled with agents, as we know. That's going to be systems that can take meaningful action. Level 4 is innovators, AI that can aid in invention. I feel like that one is very obscure, what it means, but I believe they're trying to say AIs that have the capacity that look like some of the definitions we've been looking at here for AGI that can come up with novel concepts outside of training information or applying generalistic intelligence to different domains. I think that's really what they're talking about here. And level 5 goes so broad as to say that they can do work at a certain scale, kind of be an organization and take the work on of an organization. I'm not sure necessarily that that is a requirement in AGI necessarily. I think it's kind of an expansion as they see it for AI. So for our definition here, when we talk about AGI, I think level 4 is where we're really starting to say, once these things hit that level 4, I have a feeling a lot of us would turn around and say, yep, okay, this covers a lot of the questions of what AGI has brought up or been defined as, so we think that that covers it. But there's a few more people that I'm interested in hearing from about what they think AGI means or where it is. I find some of these kind of fascinating. Okay, this is another Lex interview with Amada Askell, who is a researcher with Anthropic who works on kind of the personality of Claude. I find her answer pretty interesting. Actually, I quite agree with some of her concepts here.
I think it has to be something that I can verify is actually really good though. That's why I think these questions that are like, where I'm like, oh, this is like, sometimes it's just like, I'll come up with, say, a concrete counterexample to like an argument or something like that. I'm sure like with like, it would be like if you're a mathematician, you had a novel proof, I think, and you just gave it the problem and you saw it and you're like, this proof is genuinely novel. Like no one has ever done, you actually have to do a lot of things to like come up with this. I had to sit and think about it for months or something. And then if you saw the model successfully do that, I think you would just be like, I can verify that this is correct. It is a sign that you have generalized from your training. Like you didn't just see this somewhere because I just came up with it myself and you were able to like replicate that. That's the kind of thing where I'm like, for me, the more that models like can do things like that, the more I would be like, oh, this is like very real, because then I can like verify that that's like extremely capable.
So here we had Amanda talking about being able to provide something that's novel as a definition or at least an aspect of AGI. And I find that aspect also quite interesting, the novel concept. But I do like her concept. If it's novel, I need to be able to verify that it is novel. To me, there is something curious about that because something that has consumed the internet, it is going to be very difficult to determine the edges of its knowledge to know what is truly novel to it. Now, her example of a mathematician with a brand new proof, that one is truly novel. That makes sense. That would be completely new to an output. But the models might be creating novel things already, and we aren't aware of it because we presume, since it has fed on the internet, anything it puts out is not unique. So the creativity that we're seeing or the variability that we get out of these models today might be defined as novel, but we do not fully understand. We don't have enough introspection to be able to understand how it is deriving the answers it is. So maybe if I had seen every painting in the world and I went and painted something, you could reasonably claim that I'm repeating a pattern that I've seen. But my memory's not that strong. My tokens aren't lined up that well to be able to recreate the Sistine Chapel if I sit down with a pencil. That may be happening in some corners of these models already where you're asking something that's not replicated deeply enough or repeated enough in its training information for it to make meaningful ties, that it then creates that meaningful definition out the other side. But I find that novel argument a very difficult one for us to get our fingers around. And I'm not necessarily sure that completely novel is what we absolutely need. Because if I hire somebody at a job, I do need them to be creative and to be able to solve problems. But it is not necessary for them to come up with entirely unique solutions every time they do so. What I really need is that generalization concept of, I'm giving you an area of understanding or a context for you to work within. I want you to come back with solutions relative to other things maybe you've seen or experienced or dreamt up perhaps. And whatever conclusions you come back, the solutions you bring to me, those will feel novel within my space, which is okay. I don't necessarily need them to be something that you could have never seen an example of before. I don't judge humans that way. And thus, if I need to get to an AGI definition, I'm not sure that I necessarily need that from an AGI system either for us to say that's already doing the kind of work you expect from a human in that space. But again, I'm not even sure that the humanistic aspect of this is all that important. We'll get to that in a second. Let's take a look at a couple other people. I just wanted to show this. This kind of is the background to some of the interview that he has with Lex, and they reference the paper a few times in that interview, but I did want to show it because it's so meaningful. It's worth a highlight that you guys should reach out and take a look at it. It's really big, but it's worth consuming even in part.
So I think the starting point is to talk about what this powerful AI, which is the term you like to use. Most of the world uses AGI, but you don't like the term because it's basically has too much baggage. It's become meaningless. It's like we're stuck with the terms, whether we like them or not.
Maybe we're stuck with the terms, and my efforts to change them are futile.
It's admirable.
I'll tell you what else I don't. This is like a pointless semantic point, but I keep talking about it
Back
in public,
to naming
so I'm just
again.
going to do it once more. I think it's a little like let's say it was like 1995 and Moore's law is making the computers faster. Well, someday we're going to have like supercomputers, and like supercomputers are going to be able to do all these things that once we have supercomputers, we'll be able to like sequence the genome, we'll be able to do other things. And so like one, it's true, the computers are getting faster, and as they get faster, they're going to be able to do all these great things. But there's no discrete point at which you had a supercomputer and previous computers were not. Like supercomputer is a term we use, but like it's a vague term to just describe like computers that are faster than what we have today. So I feel that way about AGI. Like there's just a smooth exponential, and like if by AGI you mean like AI is getting better and better, and like gradually it's going to do more and more of what humans do until it's going to be smarter than humans, and then it's going to get smarter even from there, then yes, I believe in AGI. If AGI is some discrete or separate thing, which is the way people often talk about it, then it's kind of a meaningless buzzword.
I cannot agree more with Dario here. I think that a reframing of the terms, as frustrating as it is for other people, is probably needed here, because AGI is just this wildly loaded term that no one, obviously, inside or outside of the industry, really understands. There's no way to put your hand around it because there was no firm definition of it. His idea of saying, if AGI, by that you mean a system that will just continue to get smarter and smarter, be able to take on more and more roles, be able to act more and more humanistic, if you will, or be able to assume more of the previously human responsibilities, then he agrees with that. And then beyond that, continue to even get smarter. He'll agree that that's AGI. And I think that that's really the right way to say it, is there is this continuous curve of enhancement that we are seeing, not a moment in the sand.
It's just on pure intelligence. It's smarter than a Nobel Prize winner, as you described, across most relevant disciplines. It can use every modality. It can go off for many hours, days, and weeks to do tasks and do its own sort of detailed planning and only ask you help when it's needed. It's not going to be embodied, but it can control embodied tools. So it can control tools, robots, laboratory equipment. And in general, they can learn and act 10 to 100 times faster than humans. So that's a really nice definition of powerful AI. Okay. But you also write that clearly such an entity would be capable of solving very difficult problems very fast. but it is not trivial to figure out how fast.
Let's describe the extremes. One extreme would be if we look at kind of evolutionary history, like there was this big acceleration where, for hundreds of thousands of years, we just had single-celled organisms, and then we had mammals, and then we had apes, and then that quickly turned to humans. Humans quickly built industrial civilization. And so this is going to keep speeding up, and there's no ceiling at the human level. Once models get much, much smarter than humans, they'll get really good at building the next models, and what's going to happen is that models will build faster models will build faster models, and those models will build, nanobots that can take over the world and produce much more energy than you could produce otherwise. And so 5 days after we build the first AI that's more powerful than humans, then the world will be filled with these AIs, and every possible technology that could be invented, will be invented. I'm caricaturing this a little bit. The reason that I think that's not the case is they just neglect the laws of physics. It's only possible to do things so fast in the physical world. Some of those loops go through, producing faster hardware. It takes a long time to produce faster hardware. There's this issue of complexity. I think no matter how smart you are, people talk about, we can make models of biological systems that'll do everything the biological systems. There are a lot of things that you can't predict how they're complex enough that just iterating, just running the experiment is going to beat any modeling, no matter how smart the system doing the modeling is. Or predicting the economy. It's really hard to predict the economy 2 years out. Maybe the case is normal, humans can predict what's going to happen in the economy in the next quarter, although they can't really do that. Maybe a AI system that's, a zillion times smarter can only predict it out a year or something instead of you have these kind of exponential increase in computer intelligence for linear increase in ability to predict.
I think we're getting somewhere. That's awesome. I love listening to Dario. Such a smart guy. But so we have one more. I'm going to go through one more. It's Yann LeCun, who's the chief AI scientist at Meta, among many other accolades that he has. Very smart guy indeed as well. Let's listen to what he has to say about both intelligence and intelligence across systems.
You often say that AGI is not coming soon, meaning not this year, not the next few years, potentially farther away. What's your basic intuition behind that?
So first of all, it's not going to be an event. Right, the idea somehow, which is popularized by science fiction and Hollywood, that somehow somebody is going to discover the secret to AGI or human level AI or AMI, whatever you want to call it, and then turn on a machine and then we have AGI. That's just not going to happen. It's not going to be an event. It's going to be gradual progress. Are we going to have systems that can learn from video how the world works and learn good representations? Yeah. Before we get them to the scale and performance that we observe in humans, it's going to take quite a while. It's not going to happen in one day. Are we going to get systems that can have large amount of associative memory so they can remember stuff? Yeah, but same, it's not going to happen tomorrow. I mean, there is some basic techniques that need to be developed. We have a lot of them, but to get this to work together with a full system is another story. Are we going to have systems that can reason and plan, perhaps along the lines of objective-driven AI architectures that I described before? Yeah, but before we get this to work, properly, it's going to take a while. So, and before we get all those things to work together, and then on top of this, have systems that can learn hierarchical planning, hierarchical representations, systems that can be configured for a lot of different situations at hand, the way the human brain can. All of this is going to take, at least a decade, and probably much more, because there are a lot of problems that we're not seeing right now, that we have not encountered, and so we don't know if there is an easy solution within this framework. Intelligence is not a linear thing that you can measure with a scalar, with a single number. Can you say that humans are smarter than orangutans? In some ways, yes. But in some ways, orangutans are smarter than humans in a lot of domains. Intelligence is a collection of skills and an ability to acquire new skills efficiently. The collection of skills that an particular intelligent entity possess or is capable of learning quickly is different from the collection of skills of another one. And because it's a multidimensional thing, the set of skills is a high-dimensional space, You can't measure, you cannot compare two things as to whether one is more intelligent than the other. It's multidimensional.
LeCun there is on to something kind of lovely. I really appreciate his thinking around intelligence, to say that what we think of intelligence, the way we describe intelligence, and of course this is important when we talk about AI, because we're describing it as an intelligence. But for him to say that intelligence is not necessarily comparable across domains, across things. In his example, orangutans and humans, I might say, how intelligent is a dog compared to a human? And the appropriate response is not much less. That's the way we would phrase it. The appropriate response in LeCun's eyes, I believe, and I believe now in my eyes after hearing him say that, is in what domain? If we're talking about the ability to find something buried, okay, he's got an ability I don't have. If we're talking about in scent identification or understanding of its environment through the sensation of scent, obviously, if we consider that to be an intelligence, which it creates an understanding and has artifacts that are created off of that. So in other words, decisions and understandings of the world that is around the dog. That to me really does look like intelligence, and it's not something I can do. So we measure everything with our own yardstick, as he's saying. It's a scalar that we can't use against intelligence. I think that's brilliant. I think that that's a super smart concept. So when we talk about AGI, and here we are at the end of hearing a whole bunch of people talk about AGI, what AGI means, how much they believe in it, how much they're pushing away from the term or what they're taking from it, whether you measure it in money or ability or some kind of novel creation or exceeding the complexity of humanity. So this has gotten down to the root problem, which is we're not very good at describing intelligence. And so describing a new intelligence that we're attempting to create gets very, very difficult, because that then asks us first to clearly start defining our own version of intelligence. Consciousness may be another one of these conversations that we have at some point. It will look exactly the same, that we can't really define consciousness for ourselves. Thus, when we start asking, is the machine conscious? It's very difficult to understand how to answer that question. But that brings me back to one last question, which is all of this discussion around AGI. Do we need it? Is it helping us? Okay, so the question at hand, we find ourselves in an evolution, in a period of change. We're, of course, moving from no AI to very likely ASI or something nearing that. AGI is just an epoch in that evolution. I think that that's important for us to denote and understand, and being able to talk about it is just fine. So I think that as we move through this epoch of AGI, we will continue to question, have we reached AGI, all the time being inside of it? My answer, yeah, we've reached AGI. But only the very starting point of it. If we look at the stages again with chatbots, reasoners, agents, innovators, and organizations, we're at the agent stage, level 3. And I would say that's firmly within the AGI realm. Once we get through agents, we will have systems that can take meaningful action for us in business, in our personal lives, in our interactions with others. And then the last meaningful step is innovators, what we might today hear people describing as novel thought. In any case, this was an interesting dive. I had to look around quite a bit to figure out what people meant by AGI. I thought I understood it to begin with, and in fact, I found some really wonderful stuff. And I can't shout out Lex Friedman enough. I know everyone knows him. He doesn't need my shout out, but at the same time, does such a great job of interviewing people and giving them space to breathe and describe. So please go find the resources. I'll put them in the description below. And I really appreciate you being along with this one. This is a long one, but I thought kind of a fascinating concept of why do we keep talking about AGI? And we will continue to keep talking about AGI. That's the secret. There's the conclusion to the whole thing. Sorry. So thanks for coming along, and I'll see you in the next one.